Hello everyone, I am today excited to have with me here John, who is my good friend, but most importantly, founder of Glif. So hello John, welcome.
Thank you.
And then I'm excited to learn about you and then also tell us about the journey of Glif so far.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. We go back how many years? When did we meet?
Maybe I think 3 years now at least.
Which is a long time in crypto. Yeah, very long.
Long time.
So my start was I used to be an engineer at Consensus in 17, and I was working on Ujo Music. You ever hear of Ujo Music? It was like a crypto music project, and we were storing artist data on IPFS at the time. That's where I learned of IPFS. Long story short, my friend and I quit, and we started an IPFS dev shop. So we were basically building custom storage solutions for DAOs mostly at the time. And that kind of transitioned into what is currently now Glif. We basically were contacted by Protocol Labs, and they said, hey, do you want to build the Filecoin wallet for our mainnet launch? And I was like, absolutely. And that went really well. So they said, hey, how about the multi-sig for our ICO distribution? I was like, yeah. And they said, hey, how about like node hosting software for dApp builders on the network? I was like, yeah. And that was the birth of Glif. So Glif was this set of interoperable apps and tools that we were building for the Filecoin network. And fast forward a little bit more, we got a multi-year grant from the Filecoin Foundation to go basically solve the network's most important problems. And that is when we started working on DeFi, and the rest is kind of where we are now with our biggest and probably most well-known product is our DeFi protocol, which is like Lido for Ethereum or Jito for Solana. It provides capital to the network's node providers, and in Filecoin's case specifically, that is for storing data and storage mining, and it's gone pretty well.
Yeah, I'm personally a fan of, Glif, the things that you have done with multisig and now with the pool as well. Although I would love to ask you that you mentioned that some of the previous things that you built were outside of maybe your personal vision, and it was because the community wanted it. So how did you come around with the idea of the latest Glif, which is building like a protocol which allows you to lend and borrow Filecoin? How did that came out around to be?
It's a good question. I think when we were tasked with finding the most important solutions for Filecoin, it was pretty obvious that there was a major kind of capital inefficiency or a gap on the network. So at the time, there were big CeFi lenders like Dharma or Anchorage or CoinList, and they were providing loans to storage providers, but they were really inaccessible. So you had to do a lot of KYC as a storage provider. On the liquidity provider side, it was like minimums in the pretty substantial high dollar range. So not everyone could participate. And it was just a big opportunity that we found to build a protocol and a really good use case for the FEVM. So it took several iterations. Like the first version of the DeFi protocol that we thought would be good would be like a Yearn Finance, but for the CeFi lenders. And that was our first hypothesis. And we went for it. We started interviewing, user research, ended up, that's not really what people were after. And we ended up with what we have today. But what you don't see is probably the 10 iterations of the protocol.
Got it, that makes sense. I think one of the things that everyone is fan of, the whole FVM and EVM in general, is the composability. So how do you see that now you have Glif in place? How can it work with other products that maybe you envision, or maybe with Lighthouse as well?
Yeah, well, so I mean, starting with Lighthouse, I think it's an interesting thing to talk about, especially on Filecoin, because Filecoin is not particularly well suited to be like a DeFi chain, right? There are chains that are faster, cheaper, right? And so if you're like a trader or a speculator, you probably want to go somewhere else actually than Filecoin. And so when you build DeFi on Filecoin, the composability in inventing new types of storage primitives is what makes it really interesting and valuable. And so the cool thing about iFill and some of the partnerships and collaborations that we worked on is it can be used in a composable nature to build new storage primitives, like what Lighthouse is doing with the endowment model and basically staking to pay for deals and things in that general wheelhouse. So yeah, I think that is Lighthouse serves as a really good example of the types of projects that we would like to integrate with on top of Glif. It doesn't just have to be other DeFi. It can be really interesting storage as well.
Yeah, definitely for our endowment pool, we want it to be like a growing pool of funds, which is controlled by community. And when we see the minor cost that we have to take care of long term, it's either denominated in dollar terms and the rest of the portion is in felt. So most of our community members are excited to use Glif to lend our Filecoins and then grow it along in the coming years. And one interesting thing that I want to know from you, because since we have been building in the ecosystem from a long time, is do you have any thoughts or idea that you think about around the values that bring the Filecoin ecosystem and community together? Like, what are the values that you see maybe binds you and me, the other folks at this Dev Summit, and going beyond that separates us from maybe the other crypto ecosystem that exists out there?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I do think that it differs for a lot of different people in the industry. I think in general, the common denominator that gets me excited are multi-hashing, immutable data, and CIDs. So I think in the future world of the internet with AI and deep fakes and really autonomous systems, having immutable data and content addressable data becomes really important and powerful for like a safer web. I think a lot of us are rallying around a philosophical end goal, which is a safer, more robust internet and foundation for important information. Like humanity's most important data is Filecoin's kind of known claim, right? And to me, that sounds great. So that's kind of how I think we all started, at least for me, and areas that are very in alignment with most other people that are in this ecosystem. But what about you? Yeah. I'm curious what you see as well.
Yeah, I think immutability is definitely one of them that stands out. From my perspective of building Lighthouse, I do really believe in the vision of long-term storage. Like when I talk to folks outside Web3, I need not even tell about it's crypto, it's Web3. I can just tell that, okay, can we allow you to store your data long-term and just it's there that you need not worry about losing the data. That generally shines out. But obviously there are values around open source nature of the technology, around collaborating. Like for example, we are using your product and maybe you might be using some others. Like for example, we have one team in the ecosystem now launching a stable coin. So the fact that we can build products that are composable with each other and drive new value without thinking of, okay, do we compete on the investment side, on the community attraction standpoint, but more from a collaborative standpoint, I think that has tremendous value long-term, that has binded us together.
Totally agree. Yeah. A rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing, Yeah.
And what other thing that's coming next for Glif that you are excited about?
Yeah, well, so Glif, we've recently announced our token and the tokenomics. So that's predominantly been what I've been working on. Outside of specific to Glif, I'm really excited about the future of the next couple years on Filecoin. I think the first few years, look, Filecoin is building a storage product to rival Amazon and Google, right? These are really hard players to compete against. Things take time, and we're in an industry where people are mostly very impatient. Returns are given back to investors much quicker than like traditional investments. So we battle with timing issues where people who are long-term and patient, they sometimes aren't as attractive or in the spotlight or have as good now sentiment as projects that are new and shiny and haven't had a chance to prove or disprove themselves. And so I think for Filecoin now, the first 4 or 5 years have been about getting the software to the point where it can compete against some of the big data storage, players. And that's a really exciting spot to be, where we can finally start to charge, right? We've been giving out free storage for a long time, and converting that into paid deals and actually creating real solutions for people that need to store their data we're right there now. And so making that the standard, the majority for the network, is something that I'm optimistic about and quite excited about.
Yeah. And from Glif's standpoint, since you have now hundreds of millions of dollars on chain with real businesses working underneath, so do you see a vision where traditional finance would love to look into this and they were like, yes, I would love to put my money, lend it to Glif? Or is that already happening, or are you seeing some signs around that?
We have some big investors. Most of them are crypto investors and not like PE funds or pension fund, like, major size investors. I think generally you need to prove a few things in order to get that size of capital. Like, one is you need to compensate folks for the risk that they're taking, right? So generally the advice that I've gotten is that you need to kind of beat the market rate of the US federal government by 3 times. So you probably want to offer like 15% return to compensate for the risk of investing in DeFi or similar products. So we're not there, and it's a little hard to attract capital at that size. The other thing is we're not really mature enough yet. If we got another $100 million in Filecoin, we wouldn't be able to put it to work right away. And so we're not after just boosting one side over the other. We need to kind of lift both up in parallel. And so part of that is making more storage happen on Filecoin that draws the demand for more Filecoin for storage mining and pledging, which then draws a demand on Glif and allows us to go out to liquidity providers and go source more Filecoin. But for now, we haven't had to do that because the amount of Filecoin we have has serviced the storage providers and the demand that's there.
Yeah, in regard to this, although from our standpoint, a lot of our users have been using our SDKs and CLIs, but recently we launched this service called as Filecoin First, where we believe that folks can drive more value on chain rather than paying us off chain. They can pay us using Filecoin tokens as well. So maybe I think that would be one of the things that contributes to bringing more value flow on chain, which balances all of these, not just capital, providing the capital, but also using that, driving value to the miners and to the end clients as well. But yeah, hey, doing this was amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
For coming along, and then excited for what's next.
Same.
Thank you.